I'm really lucky to be here with my predecessor, John Pumphrey, who was a lighting director for the first 6 series of Red Dwarf, which I remember seeing John's name scrolling by at the end of the Red Dwarf credits when I won't tell John what age I was when I was first watching it. And it was his lighting Red Dwarf in such a super moody, shadowy and colourful way, particularly in the later series, that I've totally just ripped off for this. So it's fantastic to have him here on the set. John, thanks for coming.
Thank you for inviting me. It's lovely to be here.
So I guess people would like to know how you've probably told the story a million times, but for my benefit, how you first got into Red Dwarf and what it was like to start with.
Well, I was working for the BBC in Manchester, and I was the junior lighting director, and the boss went to a meeting, was told we're getting a new series called Red Dwarf, science fiction, space, and one of the characters is a hologram, and promptly ducked out of everything, and as the junior I was asked to do it.
So it wasn't even the job that...
No, it was, the other two didn't want it. And understandably, and it was probably a little bit out of their comfort zone.
Okay.
And as the junior, I was allocated it.
So had you done other kind of shows, comedy shows like this before?
No. I'd done sitcoms, and I'd done basically sitcoms, quiz shows, that sort of stuff. People sitting behind desks, pressing buzzers, but nothing like this.
And what was Doug Naylor and Rob Grant, what was their sort of pitch to you? Did they have a clear look in mind?
Yes, their pitch was it had to look like a World War II submarine. It wasn't to be overlit, and it was scruffy. It was a tramp ship, whatever, going around space. So it wasn't a glamorous vehicle at all. And that was the pitch. It had to look like that.
And compared to now, with all the cameras are different, what were you working with back then? What were the cameras? What sort of lights were you using?
The lights were two kilowatt lights, Parkans and those sort of things. No LEDs hadn't been invented then. The cameras worked at probably at least 10 times, required 10 times the brightness of modern lighting.
Wow.
The sensitivity, and they had zoom lenses. They just sort of come in.
Right.
They were early colour cameras.
Presumably almost tube cameras, like.
They were tubes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the early zoom. So before you had the zoom lenses, you had literally like a turret lens.
You had a turret lens.
Yeah.
They were standard zoom lenses, but they had 4 tube cameras, luminance, RGB.
So really, you had to work at 10 times higher light levels.
Yes.
So
yeah,
we're cheating really with all our puny little LEDs, which are bright enough for us. But
no, because the modern stuff is the cameras are so sensitive. The problems you've got is any light, spill light anywhere, it shows up a lot. Whereas I was having to put light where it wanted, and if I needed a bit of extra light, I had to find light. You're spending a lot of your time probably stopping light from going, spilling onto the backgrounds, and this, that and the other.
It's so easy for us because the cameras are so sensitive. If someone sort of stands somewhere where they're just being caught by a reflection of light, it's usually enough to kind of get away with, whereas I suppose there was no way of doing that. If someone stood where you weren't expecting, they were just completely invisible.
That is true, as Craig was suddenly in, I think it was in Polymorph, had to go into a corridor. They decided, Doug and Rob decided, whatever, we're going to this corridor, and I didn't have a light near it. There wasn't a light, it was a background piece of corridor, and they suddenly wanted close-ups through it. And I tried a torch, which didn't work, and it looked silly, and we finished up with Craig holding a Zippo lighter in front of him, and
presumably really close to him,
and it worked a treat, until he burnt his thumb, and then we had to stop and he carried on. But
I think if you can get the actors to carry their own light source, that solves so many problems.
It's job done. You relied. Everybody around me was working, and I had a very good creative team, if you like, and the sparks and people could get, they worked their socks off getting lights, because we had to rig. Suddenly, if you've got to rig a light, they were heavy. They were big lights.
Right.
It took 2 people to carry them and get them onto a pole and get it up and this, that, and the other. So the basic logistics were quite hard, and big crews.
How far ahead did you know about new sets and things? How much flexibility did you have? Because presumably everything took a bit longer.
Well, you had standard sets, and then you had the side sets that were changed according to the storyline, obviously each week. And I tended to know about 10 days beforehand, given the scripts to read. Then we went to a planning meeting with as you do now.
I've heard of those.
With
Sometimes we do.
And with the designer,
yeah,
he would first come up with a plan, and then we'd discuss it. Can you move that a foot and this, that, and the other? Because I need to put a light. You have all the same problems that I had. It's just the equipment has changed. But you've still got to create the look on the screen that I suspect was on show 1.
Yeah.
That they wanted, and you do it with different gear.
That first season bunk room set, which is so kind of iconic now, for reasons that will become clear, we might be looking at the lighting of that in some detail later in our show. Like, do you remember how was that lit? Like, what were the tricks? Tell me, because I might need to know.
Hiding lights inside the bunks, because that was tricky, because they were solid. There was no way you could get the lights through. And there is one part of it that I wince even now when I see the recordings of it, which was to the left of the bunk, camera left of the bunks, is a window into space. And for some reason, only known to myself, I hid a blue light out the back to give me a little blue glow on the bottom of the window ledge.
Space is blue.
And when I watch it, I think that is utter nonsense. It would not be out there. And but it lasted for at least 6 series. Yeah. And it embarrasses me a bit. And in the control room, when we looked out the control room into the star field, those were Christmas tree lights, effectively. They were all in series.
So there was no green screen out there?
There was blacks with fairy lights, with lights over it, and they were all in series. So, and we lost the bulb.
And everything would... And
they all, suddenly it just went black. And
it disappeared into a black hole.
All the faces in production asked, what are you going to do about that?
Yeah.
And we couldn't find which bulb needed replacing. Yeah. So I got some more cloth and punched holes all through it and shone a light round the back. And the star cloth
came out again.
They came out again.
The thing with the blue light I love, because I've found that when I started lighting things, I would be really conscious about, is this realistic? Like, would this be here? And the more I've done, the more I kind of go, do you know what? If it looks nice, sometimes that's more important than whether it makes perfect sense.
Yes, I mean, it gave a bit of depth, which was one of the reasons for it. I didn't want the set to look flat, and which is also why the corridors that we first had were open corridors. Yeah. And after the very first, probably halfway through the first show, they looked flat, and I got the designer to come up with some bread bins that you crates,
just plastic crates.
Plastic crates
so nothing's changed.
That you put bread in. And cover that over in various parts, and that grew and grew. Yeah. So all the shadows and things came from that, and I just shone lights down through it. Yeah, yeah. It's funny, when we first started doing that exact thing, I was like, oh, we're being terribly clever with these plastic crates. I bet no one's done this before. There's no new ideas. But in the old days, because of the booms and this, that, and the other, ceiling pieces were sort of, you didn't want ceiling pieces, but in this case, ceiling pieces with holes in were to treat and gave the production the look they wanted.
So as the series went on, like, the look sort of changes a fair bit, doesn't it, between the first series with the grey, as you said, like a submarine. So how did that develop? Each year, did you kind of sit down again and think, how can we?
No, it just evolved, and triddle about bits in corners, and we'll add a bit of this, and you pick up from obviously the production team around you, and the artists, whether they were happy in that environment, and they got a bit more scope to do things. But it was all really down to the writers and of the script and the storyline, and you with the designer, and I would sit down with the designer quite early on and sort of, can we have that foot out bit, can we put some things here, because I can hide a light here. So there was a lot of cooperation between myself and the designer to hide things, because as the lights were bigger.
Sure. Well, we found that even though the lights are smaller, like if you don't build stuff into the set, there's sort of no justification for anything. So if you and the designer don't have that meeting right at the start, you can get in tricky situations. So how about Starbug? You've had a look at our Starbug set, and you think it's
very
probably
similar.
Yeah,
it's very similar. Lights under the floor, things like that. The technology's changed because all these screens that had moving images on it were driven by VHS recorders.
Right.
And the technical manager, he had about 5, 6, 7 VHS machines, which he was loading tapes into.
Just all of the little graphics, that
all
looping
all
animation of...
Yeah, it was all of that, and that provided it.
And what about Holly? Presumably you had Holly hidden around the back somewhere.
Yes, or on the lighting grid of the studio.
Oh really? Well, this would be hidden up at the top.
Yeah, yeah. And but it was generally around the back, somewhere just in blacks, or just hidden away there.
And speaking of shooting in lighting grids, there's a bit of a red dwarf tradition, isn't there? I think we've been up and about in the gantries, and it sounds like we weren't the first.
No. Well, we had to get permission because nobody was allowed on the lighting grids. It was a BBC studio, and you just weren't allowed up there. And they wanted an engine room, a control, whatever. Yeah. And there was a lot of kit up there, hoists and motors and things. So what I was able to do was actually turn the lights in the studio upside down and shine them up through the grid, point them upwards, and get permission to actually record on the lighting grid. Yeah. And that worked a treat, and that sort of stood us in good stead.
So John, in Manchester, did you have were the sets available to you all through the week, or were you sharing the studio with other shows? Or
no, we shared the studios with other shows. After the show, the set was broken down, put into warehouse at the back or wherever, into a store, and then it was re-rigged.
So you'd be refocusing the lamps every week.
Yes.
Every week. Wow.
Yes, and similar to what yourselves have now, I'm sure. We pre-recorded one day, and then took out all the extra sets and the basic sets. Yeah. The audience went into the pre-record sets. Do
you remember what shows you were sharing the studio with?
Oh goodness gracious! Cheggers Plays Pop.
So Cheggers Plays Pop and Red Dwarf have a bizarre.
I can't. It's a time scale now. Champion Brass, that would be another show. Yeah. Regional TV shows, general shows. I honestly can't be held. Yeah. For what exactly the shows were.
That's already enough. I love the image. The Red Dwarf sets are up in the corner, and Keith Chegwin's wandering around.
Yeah, it was that sort of era. Whether it was that shows like the Oxford Road show, which was a music show, I can't honestly say it was XYZ show that went out, but it was. They were rigged and taken out, overnight rigs, but like most of those studios in those days, it was overnight rigs. The
guest sets on this show, I think I was a bit jealous of most sitcoms don't have to build an entire new spaceship every week, so maybe a normal sitcom might go to a pub or something and you have to build a little 3-wall set, but every episode of Red Dwarf is so ambitious that trying to find places that might look like there.
When they were supposed to be on a planet, we went to a cement works. Right. That's now Blue Water. Okay. Because it was clearly a well-known cement place, and we shot it at night. So we wrecked it during the day, and we found this hole, this big place, and we turned up at night, and suddenly there's this massive noise going on when we were trying to record it. And it turned out that a few hundred yards away, over the other side, there was a big crane going up and down on a track, scooping out.
All night?
All night meant, no, I think we slipped him a few bob.
Right, okay.
And said, could you lose yourself for an hour? And we were able to record it, but I didn't think of it at all. It didn't occur to me, because I agreed, this is great, this looks good, etc., etc. And there was nobody working at that time, and it was a bit of a shock. But I think probably money changed hands.
Yeah. Originally you were in Manchester for the first, 2 series? And then
probably, yes.
There was a point where that came down to Shepperton, and that must have been a very different sort of studio.
Well, it was. We looked at all the various studios, and in Manchester it was a typical BBC studio, full of lights, and if we don't want that one, we'll try that one.
The lights were just there, they were up there.
Yes, it was full of lighting bars that were electrically operated, went up and down, press a button, and there was 2 lamps per bar, with a facility for one in the middle.
Right.
And suddenly we came down to Shepperton, and there's a grid with not a single light on it.
Right.
So we then had to construct scaff squares and whatever, and we had to work out the weight, because the lamps were very heavy, and the cabling, and the BBC health and safety people, we had to check the loading, because there'd be audiences and artists underneath it, and this, that and the other. So it was a big jump for me, and we had no lighting control rooms and this, that and the other. It was porter cabins and this, that and the other. Yeah. And I had to get myself a lighting desk, and there weren't very many portable lighting desks in those days.
So what are we talking? Just huge?
Well, yeah, I got one made sort of that way, a Galaxy lighting desk, which the company made for us, a small in a flight case. Right. So we were able to take.
So it's just a custom.
It was custom built.
Where is it now? Where's the official?
I don't know. It was around. Someone borrowed it for BBC OBs.
Because there was a Galaxy in this studio which has been replaced, but it was
a big one.
Yeah, the big one. But we were teasing ourselves with the idea that it might have been the original Red Dwarf one, but it sounds like this was.
It was only about that. Came in a flight case.
Right.
And it was quite small, but and we had a porter cabin out the back, and that was it. And
would you be able to do any kind of grading and stuff afterwards, or it would all be done in the studio? You'd get your racks guy, a console operator. So
it was as
you got it right.
We got the racks, and I mean, no, we just didn't grade it. We shot it as
got it right first time.
Yeah, well, hopefully, and I was very lucky, and I got a lot of flexibility from as I've said. Some other people previously, the colours I chose, I was heavily into heavy metal music, and most of the record sleeves were deep golden amber orange and dark blue. Okay. And I liked the way they worked together. Okay. And you'll find a lot of deep golden amber and
it's
orange.
All based on your record collection.
So it's all, it's from old, Iron Maiden record sleeves and all sorts of things like that, yeah.
That's fantastic. So John, how long has it been since you were on a Red Dwarf set?
It's 20 years, isn't it?
20 years. Does it feel like 20 years?
Oh yeah, I mean, but it feels the same.
Really?
It's technically different, it's bigger. The look and atmosphere is the same.
Did it feel like at the time that this was a show that could be going on for as long as it has?
No, but it's a show that I enjoyed doing, and I actually got into it and then heavily, and it was, but I think that was just the production as well, and the artists, because everybody wanted it. It was different, and it didn't necessarily break the rules, but it was different from the way other BBC shows were done that I'd worked on, and I was given a lot of scope, and we were all part of a very good team, and in those days we stayed together, for the 6 series, you know, had the same operators, the same, you know, makeup folk and everything. So, and everybody, we all got to know what we liked, what we didn't like. I knew they want this, they want that, and it was definitely a team effort.
And it became this huge hit like pretty quickly, and then I'm just thinking of all the other lighting directors who passed on it and were like, oh, this isn't our thing. Were they like, oh, we missed out on a good show here?
No, they were happy doing what they did, and also at the BBC then there was 3 staff lighting directors. Okay, I was the junior, but while you're at your drawing board doing it, they could come in and look, and you'd ask them a question. I've got to do such and such, and they said, well, why not try this, that, and the other? And so, and you also learned from the electricians, certainly when you came down here, because they'd worked on films and this, that, and the other, and I wanted Starbug coming out some steps of Starbug, and we had to use the audience roster steps, and I was fiddling around lighting it, trying to, and one of the electricians, he said, why don't you just take the risers out of the treads, put some trace on the back, and put a light on the floor around the back.
And that's when you say, I've got a great idea. Let's take the risers out.
Absolutely brilliant, because people round you, certainly when you came down to, you know, places like this, they've done all sorts of films. They've mixed with all sorts of other lighting directors and DOPs, and you always listen to them, because you know what is my brilliant idea has generally been done before in some form by somebody else. And
it's nice if you can hire people smarter than you. That's my trick.
Well, it's, and I mean, I'm preaching, but everybody that works on a show, to my knowledge, wants it to be a smash hit. There's nobody works in TV. I'm preaching now. I'm sorry.
No,
that doesn't.
Love it.
That doesn't want it to be a terrific success, and so you just go, you know, you give 110%, and always listen to the people around you, because you know they've done it before, they've got experience, and you know you learn, and you're learning all the time.
Absolutely.
You never stop learning.
John, thank you so much for visiting. It genuinely is, and I was a bit scared to see your name on the visitors list, because I just remember it scrolling past in that original Red Dwarf credits font. So thank you so much.
No,
thank you for letting me steal the lighting design from all those years ago. Yes.